Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Training Industry Leader Talk, L&D's roles in building skills-based organizations, sponsored by Credible, Culture Partners, Infopro Learning, The Regis Company, and Open Sesame. So I'm Liz Spate, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. Before we get started, though, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speakers and get the most out of today's program. So let's open up those chat windows and let us know where you're joining us today. I am broadcasting live from sunny Raleigh, North Carolina, and it's just a pleasure to have you with us all here today. While you're doing so, feel free to use this chat window for any comments as well as questions. We will be having a very interactive session today, so please plug those questions throughout and we will address those. And additionally, we'll have some dedicated time as well. But once this session ends, a brief survey will appear in your browser. Please take a moment to share feedback on session and speakers and all that good stuff. And all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us that will include a link to the on-demand session. So I did see a question come in. You will have access to the transcript as well once you do that form. So good question. If this is your first training industry event, we would love to welcome you. We exist to make connections among learning and development professionals, and we offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, magazine, conferences, research reports, our membership, and our podcast. We would also love to hear about what you've learned from today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platform so we can continue the conversation. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our first speakers of the day. As the Senior Vice President of Infopro Learning, Nolan Hout has over a decade of experience in L&D industry and helping global organizations to unlock the potential of their workforce. And then Anu leads advisory services at Infopro Learning. She is a transformative advisor who has spent more than a decade partnering with CLOs, CHROs, and senior L&D leaders to align learning, skills, and operating models to business outcomes. So with that, take it away, guys.
Thanks, Liz. And just as a heads up for InfoPro today, Anu is going to be the main presenter today. She is having a significant issues with her camera. We have been trying to sort it out for the better part of an hour, not working. So she won't be on camera, but she will be the primary presenter today. Unfortunately, you're stuck with the face of radio is what people have affectionately started calling me with me on video. But Anu, I'll let you take over the screen so that you can start sharing and presenting the session today. I will be monitoring all of the chat. Please do engage on the chat. If you see something you want us to double click into to explore more, we're happy to do that. If you have any questions, you can also use that question panel, and we'll be taking those throughout that. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Anu.
Thank you, Nolan. And let me share my screen first. Are you able to see my screen?
We can see you.
Awesome.
And we're seeing it in full screen now, so we're good.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for confirming that, Nolan. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this session on skill-based design. That was the theme for the day today. Interestingly, while the theme is the same, we're not going to talk about skill-based design today. We're going to talk about what really, what is the biggest roadblock in operationalizing skill-based design. We have an interesting perspective on that. I'm sure you would love to hear that. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to pop in the chat. Would love to hear from you, make it as interactive as possible. So let's start. And sorry for the camera today. For some strange reason, I'm traveling and it's just not working. We've tried for a good 30 minutes. So what are we going to cover today? Here on the screen, we will talk about why skill strategy doesn't work, what is the typical gap, what the perfect capability ecosystem actually looks like, and then we will dive deep into Atlas, which is Infopro methodology, to really operationalize a skill strategy, to rationalize a portfolio so that the strategy can work. We will also look at a case study of a real project where we did portfolio rationalization using Atlas. And finally, we will talk about just three things that you can do this week, not this quarter, this week, to get your skill strategy in action. So
And
that's our agenda for today.
And just and just to comment on that as well, I think a lot of times people ask, why does Infopro Learning give all of this information away? I do want to set the stage that a lot of what you're seeing today is information, like specifically the model is something that we created here at Infopro Learning and have found to work pretty widely across large enterprise organizations. But we're not necessarily like selling you a tool or a platform that you have to use. What we're trying to do is to give you guidance on what we have seen working the best. So, what is really in it for InfoPro? What our hope is that if you see something here and you say, that's something I've struggled with, maybe I could work with Info. Maybe they can help me because I'm going through the same problem. And instead of me trying to do it myself, I'd like to partner with a company who's done it before. So that's really why we're presenting it today. I think it's usually a breath of fresh air for people knowing, we're not selling a SaaS platform or a product or something like that. We really are just trying to give some education away. And at the end of the day, if you find what we found, insightful, connect with us and possibly partner on a project. So sorry to barge in and wanted to give a little more context.
That's great context, Nolan. Thank you for bringing that. In fact, one common question that I've seen in, uh, you know, uh, that I commonly come across is that if we have the methodology, can't we do it ourselves? So we will also answer that question at the end of the session. Okay, so yeah, I hope my slides are moving.
Yep, we got you.
Um, Awesome. So most organizations do have a skill strategy. At this point, a couple of years ago, the most common question that we saw in our clients' mind was how how should we think about skill-based design, right? At this point, what we're seeing in the market is that most organizations already have started the effort to build skill-based design. Most of them also have a taxonomy. They have a skill strategy the but they're facing roadblocks. They have huge Excel sheets with a lot of skills, a lot of role definitions, but they don't know where to start. The biggest roadblock that we have seen most of our clients come across is the fact that their learning portfolios are huge. They're not rationalized, they're not optimized, and therefore they don't know how to map their portfolio with the new skills taxonomy that they have. In fact, some data points are here on the slide. 68% of the organizations already have a defined skills framework. Um, Yet, less than 20% have mapped their catalog to that framework. We also see that many different organizations, in fact, we have also validated it with a lot of our clients. The data tells us that $7 million is the average number that most big enterprises are spending on building content every year, but that content is not aligned to a skills framework. In fact, it's very hard to tell what this portfolio is doing, what this content is doing at the organization level. While it may be servicing needs of businesses, as they see today, but it is not really helping organizations see what this investment of $7 million is bringing to their business. So all of this essentially points in the same direction. Have we rationalized our learning portfolio? If we haven't, then how do you start that effort? Because most of the learning portfolios sitting with a lot of different organizations are really, really bloated. Many different courses, many duplicate courses as well. So a quick poll for you guys. Let's just spend 30 seconds responding to this. How well does your learning portfolio align to your skills framework? Do you have a skills framework? Have you done some mapping? Have you mapped the content and do you govern it? Which stage are you at? If you could take 30 seconds to respond to that, that will be great. Nolan, are you going to run this poll or is Liz
We're just
running
doing
this
it in the
poll?
chat, anew. So we're getting answers coming in.
Okay,
I'm seeing
awesome.
a lot of B's. B's and A's seem to be the majority of what we're seeing so far with the first 20 or 30 responses. Yeah, and it keeps
Mhm.
to be A and B, A and B. Seems like we got a lot of people with a skills framework, but the portfolio isn't mapped, or they have partial mapping of some roles, but not all. That seems to be the majority. We've got a spattering of C's where they've mapped content but don't govern it, and I think maybe I only saw one D. So E, none of the above. No, we have one, none of the above, as well. So it looks like really
Awesome.
A and B seem to be the one. And again, some are now chiming in that we're in the E. We haven't mapped it yet. So
Okay, great. Awesome. So pretty much what we see with most organizations, which is level 1 or 2 of maturity, we will also look at maturity model as we progress in this conversation. I got curious and I opened the chat window myself, and now I can't get out of that. So just give me a moment. Yes, I'm back on the screen. So thank you for your responses. I think pretty much, like I said, consistent with what we see in the industry. Um, so yes, so that defines the problem for us. There is a skill strategy that exists in most organizations. The content portfolios do not necessarily map primarily because they're huge, they're big, they have lots of courses. The courses may not be maybe duplicate, they may be overlapping in terms of content with each other. What we've seen in most organizations is that the 4 courses for the same topic, not necessarily telling us, which one is most current or which one is more usable. And they also have overlapping topics in most cases. And this gap, it really, keeps increasing, especially when the skills change. The taxonomy also needs a change, and therefore the content needs to be updated. But just because we don't have optimized portfolio to start with, it creates a bigger gap later. So what do we need to do? There is a mandate that we see, which is the mandate of moving L&D to really craft a capability ecosystem as against a course library. A course library always is content first. It starts building from all the different courses that we create for all needs that continue to arrive from different parts of the business. The production is usually reactive. We are typically responding to the business requests as they see the need for training in most cases, may not be validated as well. The business typically, even as L&D, we most of the time, even when we are looking at metrics, we are tracking completion and not the behavior change. The catalog therefore keeps growing, and L&D is seen as order taker. Those are, that's mostly the current state with most organizations. The skill-based framework, it really helps us move to a capability ecosystem, something that we're really, really excited about as a company because it naturally transitions L&D into the flow of work for HR. And therefore, everything becomes, the whole learning ecosystem becomes skills first. aligned to different roles. It gives us the evidence of what skills are missing in the company, what skills are building. Where is it that we have a white space even a year or two later as you implement the skill-based design. The portfolio can also be actively governed, and L&D is seen as strategic owner for this capability ecosystem. The transition, however, from course library to capability ecosystem it is not an operational, it is not, a mindset shift or just an operational shift. It is the whole infrastructure shift, right? You got to change um, people, process, technology, the whole ecosystem to really get to a capability ecosystem. And I think the biggest part also of this shift is also the governance, the way you look at the entire ecosystem and the way you monitor it and update it over a period of time also needs to change. And therefore, there is a whole operating model conversation that we had in January as well. Some of you may have attended that webinar as well. But talking specifically about portfolio, it helps us move to that ecosystem. We'll introduce the Atlas model here. It is a 5-step model. You can do step 3 without doing step 1, and therefore you got to go in a sequence. The line here at the bottom of the title is very, very important, which is the sequence that makes it work. The roles that you have in the company, they always come first, and then the skills, and then the proficiency level, and then the content. In our experience, what we've seen is most organizations approach it backwards, which is we have the skills taxonomy, and now let's start with content. Content comes last. The moment you have the skills taxonomy, first we need to figure out what roles does it map to, what proficiency levels do each of these roles need, and then what content maps to that proficiency level of that skill. If you get this sequence right, you will, you will start to make sense of the portfolio, the existing content portfolio in a much better way. Most organizations actually are stuck at this step. They have the taxonomy, they have the skills, they don't know how to operationalize the whole learning portfolio, the whole learning ecosystem to those skills. And therefore, Atlas. The first step in this process is to align your skill taxonomy to roles as well as proficiency levels, then to tag your learning assets, leverage what you can from your existing library. The idea is not to build everything from the scratch. Architect the learning journeys, and then sustain this portfolio. Let's talk about each of these steps one by one. We have a slide each so that you can understand each of these steps in detail. Align as a step is more about the existing portfolio discovery and doing an audit against it. The question that you need to answer here, the 3 different questions that you need to answer in these steps is: 1, have you mapped roles to skills or skills to roles? Vice versa, either way. Have you defined proficiency levels? Do you have content for each of these roles and for each of the portfolio, each of the proficiency levels mapping to those roles? 2 different roles in the company. You may have a course on, let's say, critical thinking. Your manager needs critical thinking at level 2, while a senior manager needs critical thinking at level 3. Do we have that defined? Once you have that defined, have we figured out the duplications in content or the version issues in that content? You may have 4 different courses sitting about critical thinking in your library, mapping to this one proficiency level. How do you decide which course can really serve the purpose and which courses do you really need to get rid of? those are the questions that you answer at this stage. Look at the taxonomy, make sure that we map skills to different roles, define proficiencies. And then once you have that figured out is when we can move to the next step.
And Nu, when you say role, are you talking? I believe you mean like, what is that person doing on the job? What do we expect this person to do? If they're the head of marketing or the head of what, a instructional designer, what do we expect of them? How do we know they're doing a good job? Is that what we're talking about when we say role? It's like their competencies, it's their performance, things like that.
In the good question, Nolan. In the skill ecosystem, we typically have a list of skills. When we say, hey, the organization is already building a skill-based design, the L&D gets a list of skills from that team. It may be HR, it may be talent team, it may be the organizational strategy team. But the typical input is a list of skills, right? And when you say head of marketing as a role, we got to map which skills apply to head of marketing as a role, right? And which skill needs to be at what proficiency level for that role to operate in the right way. And that is the mapping that you do here in this step.
Okay.
It is not just a bunch of skills in an Excel, which are important for the company or important for
Right.
each function in the company. But it's also, in most cases, this list is a taxonomy, which is for the entire organization, at best broken down for different functions. For example, marketing needs these 20 skills or these 150 skills. That's the list that we start with. But the moment you start mapping it to all different roles, what does the head of marketing need to do versus a senior marketing executive needs to do versus a content developer in marketing needs to do, the moment you start processing their tasks with respect to the skills, it begins to make more sense. So that's the alignment that we do here in this step. Once we have that alignment, the next step is to tag the different content assets that we have with respect to three different things. The first tag here is the skill and proficiency tag. Which course maps to what skill and at what proficiency level? You have, let's say, coaching skills as a course. Is it for beginners? Is it for experienced managers? We got to do the skill and the proficiency tagging for each of the courses that we have. The second step here is the role tag. Once we have skills and proficiency in place, which role is this content designed for? Because many a times, especially in our traditional world, we used to build a lot of courses, and like I said, sometimes 4 different versions of the same course because they were built for different roles over a period of time. So if you look at the reusability structure, a large part of the content that's sitting in those 4 courses may be common, right? The only layer that's different is that now they're built for different audience, so the context layer is different, right? And that is an architecture problem. So the moment we tag role to a particular course, we know that we have to extract the role layer from that content to build a reusable architecture later. So therefore, if we start tagging our library with respect to the skill it serves to, the proficiency level it serves to, and the role it serves to, it will give us a 3D matrix. Role, skill, proficiency for each course. And that tagging will help us for the rest of the steps that follow in this model. The third step here is leverage. Like I said, the idea is not to build the entire library from scratch. That's a lot of effort. We want to use what we can use. We want to retain what we can retain. And therefore, the retain, retire, recreate model really helps us get to an output or get to a roadmap or a plan where we can leverage a part of the library in a way that it can serve purpose. It can serve the purpose for various different roles. So this architecture is about looking at each course and evaluating whether we can retain it in the current form, which means if the content is aligned to the skills that we need for a particular role, if the content is current, and if the format is current, we can retain that course. We make the decision to retain that course as is in our library. We don't make any changes. We tag it to the skill, we tag it to the proficiency level, and the course stays in our future learning portfolio. The second category here is a retire category, and actually the most debated step in this whole process, primarily because I think, when we build this content over the years, when we build that entire learning portfolio over the years, we have attachment, a political attachment to a lot of courses in this library, which is very hard to let go of. So the content that is obsolete, the content that is that hasn't been used for many months or many years, or the content that may be misleading for the learners, needs to be retired from the library. Those courses need to be identified and retired from the library. But like I said, it's a difficult step to do because many a times, many of our learning team members are very attached to the content that they've built, right? So making an objective decision becomes difficult. The typical methodology that we use for this step is, if the content format no longer serves the purpose, it's a clear go, right? Because it doesn't have the usability. If the content is outdated, it's again a go. But if one of those two things works, actually not one, but if the content works, that's the first gate. If the content works, we can evaluate the format. If the format doesn't work for today, we retire it, we rebuild it. If the format works somewhat, we can modernize the course. And that modernization is a recreate process, especially in the times that we live, where AI is available for all of us to use. The rebuilding is not as hard as it used to be. Something that we used to do in 6 days can be likely done in 2 days, 3 days. And therefore, the whole modernization piece becomes much more achievable. So any content that is still relevant, but the format doesn't serve the purpose, can be recreated using AI-based modernization. So therefore, the portfolio becomes much easier to maintain, much easier to reuse, because now the modernization is easier as compared to what it used to be. But the most important component here is to make sure that we retire what is not relevant. And that decision entirely is a content decision. If the content is not relevant, if the content is outdated, if there are 4 courses for 4 different roles, might as well retire them and build a context layer on the top of a reusable asset. And we'll talk about that in our next step, which is architect, building role-based learning pathways. A learning journey is not based on skills, it's based on proficiencies. We may think about it like skills. If a particular role needs 4 different, actually 4 is a very small number, but if a particular role needs, let's say, 40 different skills, having a course for each of those skills is not the ideal learning journey. Having learners progress for a particular skill is the learning journey that we need to architect. And that's primarily because it helps them slowly get better at that skill. For example, we were talking about coaching skills, right? A frontline manager and a senior manager, both of them may need coaching as a skill, but their journeys may be different because their expectation of, because the organization's expectation of the proficiency on that skill is different from these two roles. So when we identify courses, we make sure that we are catering to those proficiency levels. We are tagging for those proficiency levels, and those levels define the journey for each of the roles. We also we talked a little bit about the modular architecture earlier in this deck. When you have 4 courses built for 4 different roles, you might as well retire all 4, extract the content that's common for each of those 4 roles, just so that it is more maintainable in the future. And then you can build context specific layers on the top for 4 unique roles. The moment we do that, we are now dealing with a shorter portfolio that's easier to maintain in the longer run. But this is a very value addition specific step. May not do it in short term, may want to do it in longer term, because at least you have courses available for 4 different roles. But it adds a lot of value to do this step at the right time in your whole optimization journey. We talked a little bit about how AI makes it easy to rebuild courses, to modernize courses. We at Infopro Learning, we have our own IDF framework to do that. It is a totally AI-enabled framework. We also have a UBot platform that helps us quickly storyboard using AI, using all the content that you already may have in your library so that the dependency on SMEs is reduced. But these 3 things put together, these 3 design principles put together, give us a portfolio that is highly optimized, reusable, scalable in terms of architecture, and also maintainable, because now we are not dealing with the number that we have in that portfolio. We're dealing with much fewer list of courses. So at the end of this step, which is phase 4, architect, we should have a list of courses that that is the optimized version of our original learning portfolio.
Can you give some examples into the shared core role specific layers? Someone in the chat had asked to maybe expand on that a little bit more.
Sure, absolutely. So we were talking about an example where we have a critical thinking course or a coaching course and 4 different versions of that. Typically, in the traditional scenario, what would have happened is, there's a request from business. We need to build a course on critical thinking for, let's say, senior managers in a particular domain. 6 months later, there's another request from the business to build a critical thinking course for frontline managers, right? Now, the L&D team went ahead, they evaluated that request, and they built another course. Let's say 2 months later, or even at the same time, in another region, there is a similar request coming for a different function, different domain, and the team of content writers went in and they built another course. And now, therefore, in our entire learning portfolio, we have 4 different versions of the same course built for different audience at different times in different domains, right? When we optimize this portfolio and we identify that these 4 courses have been tagged against the critical thinking skill, we look at the content for those 4 courses. In most cases, the concept doesn't change, right? Critical thinking as a concept doesn't change. The model, the foundational model behind it doesn't change. And therefore, all 4 courses will have some overlapping content on the foundational aspect, right? So when we rebuild those courses, we retire all 4, we extract the common content, make a course out of that, which is about critical thinking as a concept, right? What is critical thinking all about? How do you practice that skill? All of that goes into a common layer, a common piece of content, that common course that is applicable to all four roles. However, when we build that reusable as content asset, we also lose the context, right? We lose the layer that was addressing a particular role. So now you build another small course, which could be branched, or you build four courses for four different roles, which are addressing that context for critical thinking for that role. It may be those four context layers may just be 5 or 10 minutes each, but the common module, which is about the foundational principles of critical thinking and how it is applied in different contexts, it is common, right? So if you had four courses 1 hour each, now you have 10 minutes of content specific to each of those roles, but you have a 50-minute module, could be split into various different course durations over a longer journey, but the rest of the 50 minutes of content is same for each of those four roles. That's what modularity is all about. That's what reusability is all about. I hope that explains it, Nolan.
Yes, thank you.
Any more questions on that?
No, and we're at 10 minutes just as a time check.
Okay, sure. Okay, so the fifth step here is sustain. This is without exaggerating, we feel like this is the most important step. You build a learning portfolio, you take 6 months to optimize it, you rebuild content, and then you leave it as it is. Go back in to the same portfolio a year later. If you don't have the right governance in place, the content portfolio would again have bloated. You will again find a lot of courses in that portfolio which are redundant, overlapping, not mapping to skills, not mapping to skills that are important for today, unless you do this exercise on a daily, weekly, quarterly basis, which essentially points to the need for continuous governance. Once you establish an optimized library, we need to have a cadence in place to review that library on a periodic basis, to publish real-time dashboards. You could pretty much use automated alerts for that, which tell you when the content is aged, which means, you got to identify which topic or which course has what kind of shelf life, and the system flags content as it reaches that shelf life so that you can evaluate it, extend the life if needed, update the content if needed. Especially important for compliance scenarios. And then have continuous governance in place. If you could do one step out of these four, I would say continuous governance is the most important step. Unless we have governance, the portfolio will be in exactly this shape, in the shape where you optimized it another, let's say, 2 years later, or even a year later. So this is, like I said, the most critical step of the five different steps that we saw. Let's quickly look at a case study, considering we're close to the time we need to wrap up. This is a real case from a global healthcare company. We had a learning portfolio that was touching about 14,000 different people. We had 1,200 courses in this library, absolutely no skills taxonomy, and we had a new skill framework from the CHRO of the company. L&D was supposed to map to that framework, didn't know where to start. As we reviewed that taxonomy, the first step, like I said, that most companies miss, we did not start mapping content to the library. We mapped skills to roles to proficiency levels, and then we started looking at the content. As a result of this whole exercise, we applied the complete Atlas portfolio here. As a result of that exercise, The portfolio of 1,200 courses was reduced to 480 courses. Took us about 6 weeks to do the first 3 steps. 73% of the 480 courses that we're talking about map to the new skills, new priorities. And as a result of this exercise, the CLO was able to go back to the board and point which capability was built with what parts of that portfolio, which itself was a great secondary benefit of doing this exercise. We, with respect to the poll that we had on the second slide of this deck, as we started this webinar, many of you responded to that in the chat. This is the maturity model we were mapping the responses against. When you look at your portfolio and you want to figure out where you are as an organization on that portfolio, these are the 5 different stages that you could potentially be at. Stage 1 is completely uncharted. Portfolio exists, but there's no taxonomy, no mapping, no governance. Stage 2 is emerging, which is where you have a skills framework in place. L&D has started to map content, but it's a manual process. And it's also inconsistent. The responses in that for that poll, they pretty much confirmed that most of the organizations are at stage 2 or 3. 3 is a little bit more structured. The roles are mapped. Governance model is beginning to form. Stage 4 is more integrated, where the portfolio is actively governed. You don't have overlapping content anymore. You have very unique courses mapping to unique skills, unique proficiency levels. And the content is all tied to skill evidence. When you look at your portfolio, you can point which skill is served by which part of the learning portfolio, which courses map to what skills and at what levels. Sorry, I was trying to move the chat window here and I lost my screen. So going back to that here. And step 5 is a self-sustaining ecosystem where there is very clear governance. It's AI assisted, so that AI gives you all kind of signals to tell you which skills are still in demand, which skills are not in demand, which courses need to be flagged for maintenance. And skills and content both are evolving at all different times. Like I said, most organizations are at stage 2, stage 3, which is primarily confirmed from your responses as well. But the whole of the Atlas process can really help you to get to stage 4 within a span of, let's say, 12 to 18 months. So if you were to prioritize and start on this roadmap, and you could only take 3 actions, we would say do these 3. Run a portfolio audit, take one role family, do not try to target all different roles, all different families. Just take one role family, pick the highest priority role for your organization, map every piece of content against it, answer the 3 questions. Is it something that learners will use? Is it current? Is it aligned to some of the skills? And that will really tell you about the health of the portfolio at this point. Do you have a lot of overlapping content? Do you have a lot of missing content? Do you have a lot of duplicate courses? That is the evaluation that you will be able to do with this first step. The second step is to pull your usage data. Most organizations track completion. If you have engagement and application data, great. If you don't have it, at least you can look at completion and it will tell you where you are. Just the fact that you don't have application and engagement data, it tells you about the maturity of the portfolio measurement. And third step is to just get into the room where the skill decisions are made. Most L&D organizations are given the skill matrix to use, given the skill framework to use, and they're asked to map the whole ecosystem to it. They're not in the room where the skill taxonomy is getting done. Invite yourself to that room, try to find a way. And if you were to prioritize one of these actions, I would say step 3 is what is most important. It will give you the strategy, and then rest of it will start to fall in place. So the question is not whether you should build a capability ecosystem. The question is, how will we map our portfolio to that? How will we operationalize it? Something is seriously wrong with my computer today. Sorry for that. It happened for the nth time that I have the chat window covering the presentation.
As I say, no worries on you. We are out of time. So unfortunately, technology has its pros and cons, so it's not a worry at all. I think we can totally all understand that. But before we, kind of take our first break, is there anything else you would like you and or Nolan, leave with the audience today for today's session before we take
Yeah,
that?
I would say any of you, if you need help with your portfolio as you go through the questions, as you go through this process, as you go through the three things that you can do this week. If you need help, we are here. You can write to info@infoprolearning.com and we can get into a diagnostic conversation. We can help you diagnose the health of your portfolio and we can start from there. Free session, absolutely no commitment, but any whichever way we can help, we would love to be connected. If you have any questions as well, feel free to find us on LinkedIn. We can share our contacts. Happy to answer to any DMs that come our way. Just let us know. We're here. And thank you for your time.
Thank
And
you
thank
so
you for
much, Anu.
engaging.
Thank you for sticking it out. It was tough, but we made it. We made it through the session.
Thank you for your patience.
Yes, yes. Well, with that, thank you so much, Anu and Nolan. We will be taking about a 15 to 14-minute break. Up next, we do have Lauren Shapiro for their session sponsored by Accredible, From Completion Data to Capability Evidence, How L&D Teams Build Skills Programs That Stick. So in just a moment, I will end this session. You can join our next session by returning to the event lobby and going to the session tab. So I hope you all stick around for our next session, which will begin at the top of the hour. I will see you all there. Bye, everybody.